Thank you for answering back. Okay, so today I have the opportunity to talk about something that God has kind of hit me with when it comes to thinking about rest and this theme this year. And what I'm hoping it does for you guys is that it gives a perspective about rest that might be different from the norm. This year so far, we've been everybody's just been hitting some key points on why rest is so important and why God is calling us to this transition. And so today, my heart, my goal, my desire is for that perspective change to assist with what you guys already know. So this preparation was interesting with this message. We all witnessed or went through this whole storm. What was that, Friday? Man, this thing was serious because at first, whenever you hear about a storm, you're kind of in Jersey, you're kind of like, is it really going to be that serious or is it going to be really hard, right? So one of those, my wife told me, Tiff was kind of like, hey, do you need to get picked up because you have a smaller car? She has the SUV. And I was kind of like, nah, it's cool. I'm good. I don't need to be picked up, whatever. And I haven't even looked outside because my office has curtains that block out the light because I like to have my own lighting. And so I haven't looked outside all day, right? So I come and I look out the window. Now, this says a lot. You know how snow falls down. It's gravity. It comes from the top and it falls down, okay? The snow here was going sideways. And when I saw that, I'm like, okay, there's a problem. So I started packing up my stuff. I'm like, all right, it's time to go home because the snow is going sideways. That's just weird to me. So I knew it was serious. And it reminded me of a time when I was younger and we had snowstorms for school, right? That was the best feeling ever to know that a snowstorm is coming with the potential of not having to go to school, right? I loved it. Now snowstorms mean shoveling, having to make up work by the time you get back. Do I have enough vacation time? Do I have sick days? Do I have all these things? Will they make me stay my wife had to stay in a hotel next to her old job in order to come in. It's a totally different thing when you're an adult. But as a kid, I was so happy. But there was, amongst this happy feeling days, my mom would call the school and find out school's closed. We would cheer, we'd be happy. There was one night that was different from all the nights that I had off. I remember in my kitchen, looking out the window. I don't know why this gets me. And I looked outside, seeing the snow falling, and all of a sudden something clicked in my head. Like, what about the people who don't have homes? And I'm about the elementary school, maybe 9, 10. I'm a young kid. I wasn't watching any movie or anything like that would make me think about people who were poor and then have a place to go. But that night, I just looked outside, and as a young kid, it bothered me. And so to the point, I think, I can't remember too much, but I thought I remember asking my mom, it's like, wait, so what happens to them? Like, I'm looking at this snow, I'm looking at this blizzard, this everything going on. What happens to them? And so that always stuck with me since I was a kid. And obviously, when we see people who are begging, who are poor, who are, on the street, I know we have to go through that filter of, is this guy kind of playing around? Is this girl trying to scam? Which I understand. There's a lot of that nonsense out there, which is sad because it hurts the people who actually need it. And so I think about, whenever I think about poor and all these things, I think about how their faces are dirty. Like, they're not clean, they're not all washed up. Obviously, you see shame, you see sorrow in their face. You don't know what, like, sometimes their eyes are just a daze, like, maybe something regrets in the past. I feel like there's so much that it may be going on through their mind. What are they thinking about? What are their dreams like? I think about how whenever they're asking the posture they have, what it causes within inside them. Do they want to be invisible and not be seen because of just the shame that's coming on to them? The fact that they're alone. Like, I rarely see like a group of homeless people, and it's just in my experience, just chilling by them all together. Most of the time I see they're alone. It's probably what got them to that point. Those things really kill me. I remember reading an article, one lady, she was saying that she saw a homeless person, and she went up to the person and knelt down next to them, touched them on the shoulder, and kind of said, hey, I don't have money, but I have my lunchbox, I have my love, and I have something else. And she touched them in his face. And this sad, depressed person looked up with just gladness, because he was saying that nobody touched his skin in years. I can't even imagine what goes on in your mind to not be touched for years by another touch. You're already alone. What gets you to that point, you have no family, no nothing, no resources probably. I'm talking about people who are really beggars, not people who are just trying to get by. Nothing, and for years, this guy has never been touched. I mean, we hear the stories, them doing tests between a baby who's never been touched before and babies who are, like, they can almost die from that. Imagine humans, like us adults, having to be cut off human connection. I can't imagine what it would do in the mind. Most people look at them like they have mental issues. I know a lot of those, or we think that you just want drugs or whatever. And you could think about being in that position, a beggar, right? If you are one of them, there are certain things we lose. Like for me, I would think like, listen, to pass the time, I'm gonna probably like maybe read a book or do something, because I don't want to go crazy over boredom trying to wait for people to give. But that doesn't help, because people only give if they feel guilty enough to give. So if they see that, oh wait, you're educated, oh you're doing something to pass time, you're not that serious, you don't want help, pass you by. So you can't even keep yourself occupied. You can't have this positive smile on your face like, oh man, God is going to give today, hey, because that doesn't help another person to feel like, wait, you need this? You seem fine. And with all the money that you get through a day, right? Are you going to go buy new clothes? You going to go get cleaned up? No. Because that's another thing of people being like, wait, you look fine. So all these things that you have to sacrifice as one that's a beggar, it's sad to see that they are going through all of that. It's sad to have to experience that mentally, their pain. I read this one article of a person's experience. They weren't poor, they weren't beggars. They just got caught in a situation in, I think, a different country, where they had no access to any of their funds or anything, and they needed to get to the airport, and it was like 2 bus trips away. And they said that switch, that contrast of having to come and just like, God, can you help me? I need money. And they're looking at them like, listen, you're fine. And it's just like, to have to stoop down to that level and know that, listen, I know who I am, but like I have to ask and they're not believing me, and you're stuck and you're trapped and you can't move anywhere. And they said, man, those couple of hours was one of the worst experiences in their lives. Imagine living that years and years. So those things really hit me. And then when I think about Jesus, right, I think about one of his famous sermons. He uses the poor in his first line. And I always thought about, why did you use the poor? All those things that they go through, why do you use the poor as the first line, your introduction to one of your famous sermons to your disciples who you just appointed? And so in Luke 6, verse 20, they call this the Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon on the Plain, Beatitudes. And if you could pull up the verse, this is what verse 20 says when it starts. And he lifted up his eyes on his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God." Now I know many of us, we heard this, we've read this. This is nothing new. This is basic to us. In fact, for me, I always thought, man, when I was a kid reading this, I thought, man, what are you saying? And so the first thing I thought was prosperity. Like the prosperity gospel. Okay, everybody who has low, that you're poor and everything, God is going to bring this fortune of resources and everything and just bless you, so that this is what the gospel is about. We're about to flip it on everybody. I know you're poor right now, but we're going to flip it. And although God does that, I thought that's what this was for years. And then I thought about, wait, but who is he talking to? He's talking to his disciples. So I'm like, okay, this message was directed to your disciples, so what are you talking about? Peter had a business. He was never poor. So why are you saying the poor? James and John, they were able to work in their business. Matthew was able to do a whole big feast, a party for Jesus, and which was expensive. So why are you talking to them about the poor? And that the poor, the kingdom is theirs. Not only that, in the rest of this sermon, he does contrasts, like right in the next verse, "Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be satisfied." And he does that. If you're this now, if you're sad now, you will laugh. If you're this now, you will that, right? But that first verse is the only verse where he says, "For yours, blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God." So I'm like, whoa, there's a difference between these other contrast things that you're saying in your message. If you have time to read it, check it out. But the fact that he's telling people who have never been beggars, because when I was studying the word poor in this, it's not just poor, like, I'm trying to make it, and like we barely got a good budget. It's those who were like cringing over. The word that was used here was cringing over, like, please, please. That's the poor he's using in this word. But again, like they're not poor. We have no record of them experiencing something like that. What are you saying? And now, the other thing that was wrong with what I was thinking before is that, wait, is entering the kingdom, is the kingdom being yours, not like ownership, but you having access all resources? Is it dependent upon income? If you're rich, sorry, you can't make it. If you're poor, you got it. Like, that doesn't even make sense. That's not even consistent with his word. So looking into poor, what are you saying, Jesus? He's talking about a state of mind. Jesus is talking about a condition in the mind. He's talking about an attitude towards God. He's talking about a mindset. And for me, I like to call it, within this context, a rest mindset. Because rest could be a lot of actions, not a lot of actions, but what you can go through a list of what to do. But in this, I want to talk about the rest mindset. Now, why is mindset so important? This is what mindset means. Mindset, the established set of attitudes held by someone. Attitude, what does that mean? A settled way of thinking or feeling about someone or something, typically one that is reflected in a person's actions towards. So, mindset is important because it determines how we respond to God. And so, I used this before here. I recently used it with the winter camp youth, right? I was honored to be able to be asked to go speak at the youth winter camp this past February. And I wanted to talk to them about an illustration that I did here years ago. So for those who remember, this is a reminder, but for those who haven't heard this was something that God helped me to understand what does mindset really play in our lives. So what I did, I went outside at youth summer camp, winter camp. I took a stand in the same spot, took a picture of the basketball court. Took one picture, right? This camera. Then I took another picture, same exact position within seconds of each other, right? I went to go speak. I showed them the two images. They were like night and day, complete different contrast, to the point where one girl was like, well, maybe what you did was you took one in the morning and you took one at night. I said, no, I actually took it seconds afterwards. What would cause the same exact camera, lens, everything to take a totally different picture? And everybody was guessing, right? And then I was like, the only thing that's different was the settings. The settings inside the camera. I was able to have a different image once I made adjustments and changed the settings. And the camera works the same way our eyes work. It takes in light and creates an image. And I had control of what image this would take. That's mindset. Mindset is the settings you choose within your camera, within your mind, to determine how things are going to come into your brain, into your mind. And why that's so important is because that will determine how you respond, especially how we respond to God. Now, for example, why image is so important? Driving. Let's be real. Who's driven and held their phone to either answer something or text? Raise your hand. I want to see it. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. All be ashamed of yourselves. I have never, no, I'm just kidding. So what happens when I notice when I do something like that, I'm trying to answer a so-called important text, like something. What happens is when I look down, I'm seeing something, I look back up, I'm like, oh, snap, right? We get that a lot. You got to brake too soon, or you got to adjust. You're kind of going off the road a little bit. That's because my body stopped seeing the image of the road, started looking at something else, and everything was not responding to what was really going on the road. That's why the images that come in our mind, what we see is so important. But how we see what we see, the settings we decide to put in, is so important because that's how we'll react. And it can be either a nice smooth sailing, or it could be a crash that you end up happening because you saw the wrong thing. So that's why rest mindset, the rest settings is important for us to gather up, because that's the foundation for a lot of the things that Jesus is calling us to. And so why Jesus started with the poor is because it's a mindset. Now you think about it, poor is the last resort. Like, no, the real beggars, the type that really does that, it's the last resort, meaning you had no other connection. Why is it the last resort? Do you know how much I have to sacrifice? I'm talking about Jag. Do you know how much I have to let go in order to get to that position where I'm begging like that? Just being real. My pride, straight up, would have to be thrown out the window. My reputation, my ego, my sense of security, my warmth of love around people. Like, I would have to come to sacrificing all of those things to get to that point. So what would get us to that point that we would be like, yo, I have no other choice but to rest in God? Because if he's talking about the poor, and that's the mindset, that's something he's saying, you've gotten to a point where you have no choice but to rest in God. But to get to that mindset of, yo, all I have is you, God. I have to rest. I think we look at rest as a luxury. Like, oh, okay. But he's calling the first line in his message to his disciples that will go out and change the world, these 12 people and all this stuff, the first line was mindset. And that's what he's calling us to. And in this season, we need to transition to this rest mindset. What would get us to that place where, yo, I have no choice but to do this? And I thought about it. I had to pray about it. I'm like, God, I don't feel like I'm at that place where it's like, yo, I got to do this. What would get me to that place? And a couple of things he showed me. I had to have a deep understanding in order to get to that place where I need to rest. And I'm still working on it. I had to get to a place with a deep understanding of who he is and who I'm not. I wish there were like bright lights and explosions that happen when I said that, because that's how I feel inside about that truth. Who he is and who I am not was so key for me in this last year of transitioning, because I had to look back in my past and realize, oh snap. You're telling me everything that people see good in me, speaking, teaching, whatever it is, everything people see good in me, that was because you literally moved everything in my life to happen that way. Because it would have taken one slight move, one slight change of direction, just like a train, how they have their courses, and that slight move on the rail could have changed the whole approach of everything in my life. It was because you chose to set these things up so the tracks in my life could move a certain way. How dare I think I had any control of who I am, of the good that you're using me for, of everything like that. How dare I think I had any control? Thank you, God. I have no choice but to just rest in you, because I know that truth. I know who you are, and I know who I am not. The other thing that he told me to help me to better deeply understand, to get to that place of I have no choice but to rest, was to get empty. When I think about empty, my first initial thought is negative, because there's a void. There's something that's missing. Like when me and my wife moved to an apartment that we were just in now, we come in, it's empty, right? We didn't have the couches and different things that we have now. It was just empty. But come on, what that speaks in your mind, for even myself, is like, dang, man, you need to get start saving up, start building, because you're lacking in this home. You're lacking. So empty looked kind of negative. It's like, yo, this is like vacant. It's kind of sad. It's like, oh, you got your TV on the shoebox, kind of like, oh, that's not really cool. But it says something, even though we know it shouldn't. It does. So empty sounds negative to me at first. It's like, yo, something's negative. But recently, I heard one of Jason Upton's songs. He just dropped the album this year, and I heard the song, and he always drops these pearls, these gems that just change your whole perspective and theology and whatever you thought about anything. It's just like, boom. And he said something that changed my perspective about empty, that initial thing that I do. He said, empty is just a space for us to receive. Empty is just a space for us to receive. The rest mindset puts us in a place that we're empty to receive rather than putting ourselves in a position to get. Meaning, and that's why I love Pastor Sharon's message last week. She just straight up told you, listen, I'm working on this. I had a workaholic kind of mindset. And I had to deal with that with myself in my life. It's just like, I just like progress. I need progress. I need to get so that we can do more and get so. And I had a positive agenda behind it. It's like for the kingdom, right? And that's not like we can't have those positive things. But I was trying to put myself in a position to get. Got to keep pushing. But the rest mindset, like Jason Upton said, is to put you in position to be empty, to receive. Because that is so important. It changes what's wired inside of us. It changes the settings in here so that we can now understand, look, I come to you empty. And what's empty? Empty of the same things that the poor people are empty of. Security, pride, ego, reputation, resources. You actually empty yourself to be open enough to receive his security, his resources, his knowledge, his wisdom, his stuff. And that's the issue. We're clogged up. That's why rest is so important. That's why when we finally see this is why we need it, I have to empty myself. I have to get to that point where I'm a beggar. Not in the sense of we're begging God, but in the sense of I've released all these other things that give me some sense of security. I've released it. I've changed my settings, Father, so that I can see a different picture. That picture causes me to respond in a way where I can come in and take my Sabbath with joy and not have to worry about what's going on because you got it. That's the rest mindset. That I don't want you guys just to kind of do a task, not necessarily a task of, hey man, these are the practical steps, which are very important, of your Sabbath, of your day-to-day quiet time. Those are super important. But I just want you guys to understand this. In this sermon that Jesus said, you guys know the golden rule, right? The golden rule is do unto others as you want done unto you. Okay, that came from this sermon, right? The sad thing is, the world uses that, right? They use the golden rule. They have their versions or whatever. They use the golden rule. But the thing that's twisted and that's not right is this. Jesus wasn't talking to the world. He was talking to his disciples. And before he even said the golden rule, that practical kind of thing, he said, hey, mindset first. The poor, the kingdom is yours. Before I tell you anything about anything in my message, the first thing I need you to know is mindset. And I say that because I want us to come into that same place of rest. It's easy to do these practical steps, but he's asking us, first of all, mindset, change the settings. Because you'll be doing these actions and you won't get the full benefit of what I'm trying to pour into you because your settings are still off, even though you're doing the actions. Because actions, I can capture the same action in this camera. But because the settings are different, I can come out with two images that will make me do different things. So the action alone is not what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about the mindset. And just to emphasize the golden rule, what I used to think was do unto others as you want done unto you, right? Okay, I'm going to do these things for you in hopes that you'll do it for me. That doesn't even sound right. that sounds like I got some agenda. Like, listen, I'll help you out if you help me out. Where is that even consistent with his word? So what is Jesus really saying? He's saying in this to his disciples, that's why he was talking only to them. Yeah, people were listening. He wasn't talking to the world. He's saying to these disciples who have context of who I am, as much as spiritually, the positive spiritual things that you would want done to you, those positive spiritual things you do unto others. It's not of, I'll give you $5 and hope you give me $5. It's no, I'll pray for you as passionately as I would want you to pray for me. I'll be community with you spiritually as passionately as I would want that you to do for me, but not doing it, waiting for you to do it for me. That's not my agenda. But you see how twisted the world can take something because they don't have the mindset? They're like, look, I wash your hand, you wash my hand. That's what the golden rule is to them and the other religions. So mindset is important. I don't want you guys to do these actions. I don't want you guys to start thinking about rest and going into this year with everything that we're going to learn. Please check your settings to see how poor are you? How much of a beggar mindset do you have that you're willing to let go to be empty and to receive? Father, I'm asking that you begin to show us our current settings. Even without changing our settings, I ask that you begin to show us our current settings so that we can begin to see where are we right now with how we view. What's the picture that we see right now? And I ask that you would put the desire in our hearts to take these pictures that we see in our lives that give us a message that tells us we're secure, we're safe, everything is all good. And I ask that you help us to give that up to you and that you begin to show us, hey man, you have some settings that are off. This is not a rest mindset mode. You're on the world's mode. You're on the self-reliance mode. You're on the my abilities, your talents mode. When you're asking us to be on a rest mode. So I ask that you just begin to filter our thoughts, begin to show us who we truly are in our minds, and begin to teach us this year how to come into a rest mindset that releases it all. I love you so much. Thank you, guys.